Recorder. All right, so first things first, let's go through MLA documentation. Then we will circle back to the including evidence, just to make sure we go through that, and then open discussion on at least the first 3 chapters of Dragon Can Dance. I would say the first 5, but if we could get up to at least the first 5, that's nice. If not, at least the first 3, right? And I have no pity. I'm on my 14th book since the lockdown, so hey, I have absolutely no pity. Shouldn't laugh at that. Yes. And the last book took me almost a month. Woo! But anyway, so let's go. So first up is MLA documentation. Right? So at the end of this module, you should be able to use proper MLA in-text and works cited citation styles, as well as formatting your paper using MLA. Okay, so as you can see from that video, there are a few basic formatting things for your essay. There is no cover page in MLE. Instead, your first page contains all the information, so your name and student ID, name of the class, name of the professor, and then title of your work. And if we have not stressed it before, everything you write at this point should have a title, right? It should not just be assignment 1 or assignment 2, it should have a name. right? Practice naming things so that by the time you get to writing a title for your thesis, it is sockeye. Some things to note: you do not have to say um, of investigation of, examining the, things like that. Notice in the example that the type of inquiry is implied in the title. So the title should suggest what it's going to be about, at least the topic, and should hint at perhaps the thesis without giving anything away. So if you read something like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Drugs and Metaphysics, you'd expect the essay to look at the use of narcotics in the movie slash book and how it leads to metaphysical experiences or understanding, right? So it sets up your expectation. So a good title is always worthwhile having, and it's, at this point we should be practicing writing titles. The next thing, and I start with formatting because bad formatting drives me mad. It feels like disrespect because you won't even take the time to follow simple conventions. These are not conventions that have anything to do with spelling or anything like that. It's purely just a format, you know? Kind of like if someone shows you how to make up a bed and you decide you will do your own thing anyway, right? You can't do that in the military. If the military tells you to make up the bed, you have to make up the bed like they taught you in the military. So formatting your paper is the first step in making an appeal to your, an appeal of character, what we call ethos, showing people that you are a credible source. Because at the very least, you know the conventions of your discipline, you know the conventions of the type of, format that you need to use. So formatting becomes, it is what we will call paralinguistic communication. Before we even start to read the essay, we can tell from your formatting, or we will make a judgment from the formatting how serious or not serious you are. Also clues you in, if you, I've had students do this, you increase the size of your margin so that it looks like you've written more pages. After a while, we could spot a big margin without even having to measure it. So again, it suggests a level of dishonesty or deception because you're increasing the margin. So paying attention to these formatting things will automatically instill in your reader a sense of, well, this person knows what he or she is doing. This person is taking this seriously. This is worth my time reading. Right? So have a title and do the proper formatting. Because really, yes, when people don't do formatting properly, and pay attention to, I think this is based on, I haven't updated it in a while, but I do believe it's still the latest MLA version. And that's partly because I never agreed with that nonsense MLA used to have where you wrote the type of source, whether it was print or DVD or online, because that's embedded in the information in your works cited anyway, which we will get to, right? If not, there's always owl.purdue.edu, and there's a link at the end of this module as well. That is an online, free-to-use source to help you learn citation. Citation is a formula um, more than you can understand the logic of it, but it really is a formula you just follow where to put what and when and how, right? And I will not lie to you, it is probably the most annoying part of academic writing. But it's just something that suggests to the reader that you've gone through a program somewhere and you know what you're doing as a writer. So the next thing, in text citations, as you can see, there are a lot of nitty-gritty little rules for the in-text citation. The simplest thing to remember, last name, page number, no punctuation. Right? So if you're used to APA, in APA there's punctuation. In MLA, there is no punctuation in the in-text citation. Right? Well, except if you're doing abbreviations and you have the full stop, but other than that, there's no comma between the last name and the page number. When we say attributive phrase, and we will talk about that a little bit more when we talk about inserting documentation, paraphrases, quotes, summaries, etc. An attributive phrase is simply before you insert evidence, you tell people where it comes from, right? So watch the video again, take your notes, slow down. If you have any other questions on in-text citation, as always, owl.purdue.edu, which would go into even greater detail. The in-text citation is not as varied as the works cited. There is a simpler formula to follow, including putting any coda punctuation outside of the parentheses, right? So if you're quoting or paraphrasing, you end the sentence after, or you end the clause after the citation, right? And the third thing we will look at is the works cited. And since this is a little bit more cumbersome, it's easier to do it in a static way, right? So at the end of this, you should be able to at least basically put in a works cited. So the works cited page starts on a new page. It's on a page all its own. Center the title, works cited. Skip a line, and then you start entering your information. List all entries alphabetically by last name. Use a hanging indent, and this means that the first line of your citation is flush with the margin. The next line, as it spills over, is half an inch away from the margin. That's called a hanging indent. And I can show a little demonstration here. Just do a blank document here. So it's the easiest way sorry, oops, clicked the wrong thing there. The easiest way is to use your ruler. So make sure when you are typing that you turn on. So you go to view, turn on your ruler. Right, so you'll turn on the ruler, so you get the ruler on top and the ruler on the sides. So for the works cited, you start in the middle. Right? So you have a title that goes over 2 pages, over 2 lines. And you could do this after you finish typing up all your works cited. This little triangle here. And so I take it to about 1/2 inch. And if I hit enter, it remains in that formation. So that's a hanging indent. So what we want to include as much information as possible: the author's name, last name, first name, title of the work, title of the container. The containers are is what the work appears in. So if the title is a book, then the book is the container because that's where the work appears. Other contributors, if there are any like translators or editors, if there are versions or editions, number. So if it's a journal, for example, you would have a version or edition or an issue. Then you have, sorry, a volume, yes, number. And the publisher and the publication date. Location. So this is all the information, and this is why so long this is all the possible information you could have in a citation. Usually doesn't take all of this, but this covers all contingencies. So location, second container's title. So if you found a book on quorum.com, so that's a second, the quorum.com is a second container. The book is actually in another container, and so on. Other contributors: version, number, publisher, publication date, location, date of access, if applicable. So that's a list of everything that could possibly go into a MLA citation. So let's look at specifics. With the book, which is your basic, well, once upon a time anyway, most sources were books. Now with the internet, people could get journal entries a lot easier. But last name, comma, first name, full stop, title, publisher, year. So for example, John, Carol, full stop, Fishing Lessons is the title of the book. Notice the title is italicized. Knopf is the publisher, and 1995 is the year of publication. You italicize container titles. So if it's a long work, it's italicized. And we will consider a long work anything that contains shorter pieces in it, right? Notice too that you capitalize each word. So Fishing Lessons is capitalized. So you capitalize each word. If it was published before 1900, last name, first name, title, city of publication, and year. Right? This is to accommodate earlier texts that may not have gone to a specific publisher, published before 1900. The business of publication has changed somewhat since our cutoff date. So last name, first name, title, city of publication, year. So example, John, Carol, full stop. Fishing Lessons, full stop. New York, 1893. If you have two authors, so it's a book with two authors, last name, first name, and first name, last name, full stop. Title, publisher, year. So Jacob's Bull and Mary Apple, Studio Arts, Knopf, 1999. Notice, typically, we go by the order on the title of the book. So if the, and usually the order indicates who's the lead author, right? So we go by the title of the first person listed as the author on the book, and that is how we would arrange it alphabetically. Right. So need to turn on my camera. So for example, with a book like this, and I know it's back to front, I apologize, but you see there are different authors, right? So we go with the first author listed, and that's where who we start with our citation. So we will go in the same order we see on the book. If you have more than two authors, last name, first name, et al, title, et al is abbreviated Latin for everybody. Title, publisher, year. So for, again, Jacobs, Bull, et al, full stop. Studio Arts, full stop, Knopf, 1999. Right? If we have multiple entries for the same author, so this is author has two different books that we are citing from. The first entry in the work cited is a last name, first name, title, publisher, year. The second entry, 3 dashes, so use 3 hyphens, full stop, title, publisher, year. So for example, Jacobs, Bull, full stop, Painting with Rulers, full stop, Bantam, 1993. dash, 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 full stop, straight lines in art, full stop, Macmillan, 1998. So when we see the dash, 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 full stop, it indicates it's the same author. So we don't have to rewrite the author's name every time. And since it's in alphabetical order, this is pretty safe and easy to do. It will not confuse people looking in the works cited. So we're using an official publication from, for example, what do you call these people? Government organization and so on. We would cite it as follows. Name of the organization, full stop, title, full stop, publisher, comma, year. So this is where it might be an official pamphlet with no specific author. The organization acts as the author. So World Health Organization, full stop, measles prevention, full stop, Putnam, comma, 2000. If the organization and publisher are the same, you only need the title, the publisher, and the year. So if WHO had published that pamphlet or guidebook, we'll just say measles prevention, full stop, the World Health Organization, comma, and the year 2000, full stop. If there is no author, so you stumble across an article and there's no cited author, we'll use the same format, title, full stop, publisher, comma, year. Right? So sometimes, especially if you're citing from the internet, there is no specific author from the website. The publisher is the website. So that's enough for your reader to find it along with the URL or the link. So you're pulling from an anthology or a collection of essays, right? So last name, comma, first name, full stop, title of the essay or the chapter, title of the anthology or the collection, comma, edited by, and then you put the editor's first name, last name, comma, publisher, comma, year, comma, pp for page, for pages, full stop, and the page number, the page range. So for example, James, comma, John, full stop, we are all mad, mental health today, comma, edited by Mary Mark, comma, Macmillan, comma, 2015, comma, pages pp dot 334 to 43, full stop. If you're taking an article from a reference book, such as an encyclopedia, or a dictionary or medical dictionary, etc., things like that, title of the article in quotation marks, full stop, title of reference book, edition and its number, ed, full stop, comma, year, full stop. So Original Funk is the name of the article, full stop. It's found in Big Book of Music History, full stop. It's the second edition. So I have the edition number, followed by ed, full stop, comma, published in 2006, so 2006. If you're citing from a magazine article, and we differentiate magazine from journal, a magazine will not be peer reviewed. So anything like Caribbean Beat, Elle, Vogue, People, Us, Mako, if you're looking at local stuff. No, you don't see magazines much anymore. Last name, comma, first name, full stop. Title of the article in quotation marks, full stop. Title of the magazine, comma, day, month, year, comma. Public page, PP for pages, full stop. And then the page range, full stop. So Kanai, comma, Jaidu, full stop. Doubles Mania is the name of the article, the title of the article, so that goes in quotation marks. Caribbean Beat is the name of the magazine, so that's italicized, comma. 28 May 2009 is the date it was published, comma. Page pp.10 to 14. Similarly, for a newspaper article, last name, comma, first name, full stop, title of the article in quotation marks, title of the newspaper, day, month, year, comma, edition, comma, page, a single P this time, dot, page number, full stop. Edition refers to, in some cases, where you might have a morning edition and an evening edition, right? So Booker, comma, June, full stop, that's last name, first name. PM arrives late, that's the title of the article. It's found in the Trinidad Express. So we have the Trinidad Express here in italics, comma, and it was published 23rd May. Comma, 1998, comma, and found on page 3. I'm watching that come a little suspiciously, actually. I'll have to double check that. A scholarly journal, on the other hand, would have articles that were peer reviewed, specific to discipline, and the citation is slightly different. So last name, comma, first name, full stop, title of the article in quotation marks, full stop, title of the journal, comma, volume, and then the volume number, comma, number, and then the issue number, year, comma, PP, dot, and then the page range. So Fisher, comma, Francine, last name, first name, the aesthetics of Bailey, title of the article, Festival Study Journal, title of the journal, volume number 3, comma, issue number 5, published in 2001, and can be found in pages 22 to 30. For electronic sources, so these are things published online or CDs, non-print material. Last name, comma, first name, full stop, title of the page, especially if it's a website you find it, publisher, there's a separate, if you know the publisher of the website, date of publication, URL, access date, so the date you read it, not the date it was published, but the date you read it, month, so access day, month, year. Do note that you do not need to include the HTTP : // You can just start with the name of the website. So you usually start with www, right? So for example, James, comma, John, full stop, that's the author. Going Home, that's the title of the page. Blogger is the title of the website. And because I do not know publisher or date of publication, I skip ahead to the URL, and that's the link, and then access 13 January 2015. If I don't know the author, Going Home, full stop, Blogger, Google.com is the author, the publisher of Blogger. The year it was published, 2015. URL, access 13 January 2015. So you're seeing with the formula, you include all the information you have. If you do not have the information, do not make it up, simply leave it out. First sourcing, citing artwork, last name, comma, first name, full stop, title of work, date of creation, institution, housing, work, location of the institution. So for example, Van Gogh / Vincent, comma Vincent, that's the last name and first name of the artist. Sunflowers is the title of the work. It was produced or created in 1823. It is housed in the Louvre Museum, and the museum is in Paris. If it is online or if it's in a text, right? So you didn't go to the Louvre and watch sunflowers. Say you looked at it in a book. So last name, comma, first name, full stop, title of the work, date of creation, institution, housing, work, location of institution, book title, edition number by the author, first name, last name, publisher, and the page you found it. So you're starting with the artist, Van Gogh, comma, Vincent, that's the artist. Sunflowers is the name of the work. It was created in 1823. It is housed in the Louvre in Paris. It's found in Vincent's Vision, 3rd edition, written by James Roll, published by Putnam, and found on page 300. So again, the idea is that when I work through your works cited, if I want to follow your sources, I could find exactly where you got your information, your quotation, your evidence from. So if you find it online with the artwork, last name, first name, title of the work, date of creation, institution, housing, work, and then the URL. So I didn't go to the Louvre Museum, but I went to their website. So Van Gogh, comma, Vincent, the artist, Sunflower, the title of the work, created in 1823. It's housed in the Louvre. And I went to the Louvre's specific website where I found that picture. Song and an album. So again, the album is the container. The song is like a journal entry or an article. It's a specific shorter piece of work. So band / artist, song title, album, record company, and year. So the Mighty Sparrow, Dan is the Man, the Best of Sparrow, RCA, 1995. If you were going to name him by the artist, you could use his name, Francisco, Slinger, full stop, Dan is the Man, Best of Sparrow, RCA, 1995. Now, specific to us and a lot of the work we have to do, a lot of our source material might come from YouTube, especially if you're looking at Calypso performance and those kind of things. You'll find it on YouTube, not really written down in a lot of books. So last name, comma, first name, full stop, video title, YouTube, uploaded by, first name, last name, day, month, year, when it was uploaded, and URL, right? So for example, it is, the video was originally created by Anne Frank, so Frank, comma, Anne, full stop, is titled On the March. It's on YouTube. It was uploaded by Michael Marsh on the 30th of April, 1946, and then the URL. If the upload and the author are the same, we start with the video title, YouTube, uploaded by first name, last name, date, month, year, URL. So say Michael Marsh was the one who took the video and uploaded it. So we start with on the March, YouTube, uploaded by Michael Marsh, 30 April 1946, and then the URL. So again, this one becomes kind of important because a lot of our quote unquote archival material in terms of performance is on YouTube. So you might find yourself referring to YouTube as source material. So this is good to know. Email. So if you conduct a survey or an interview via email or correspondence via email, last name, comma, first name, full stop, subject line, received by, first name, last name, day, month, year. So Francis Bacon is the person sending. So Bacon, comma, Francis, full stop. Name of the subject line will be our last meeting. It was received by Percy Shelley on the 23rd of April, 1899. Right? If you're conducting a personal interview, right? You start with the interviewee's name, last name, first name, personal interview, day, month, year. Now, of course, when we say personal interview, we know you're the one conducting the interview. So Bacon, comma, Francis, that's the person who's interviewed. Personal interview, and then the date, 23rd April, 1899. Of course, this can be adjusted if you made a phone call or whether you spoke to the person whether you spoke in person. If it is an untitled published interview, so you came across an interview in a magazine, we start with the interviewee's last name, first name, full stop. Interview with the interviewer's first name, last name, full stop. The container you found it in, so the magazine, the newspaper, the book, so on, comma, volume, issue, year, and pages. So for example, Joyce, comma, James, that's the person who was interviewed. Interview with Francis Bean, full stop. Irish Novelist Weekly, comma, volume number 4, issue number 3, published in 1930, pages 7 to 10. I mean 7 to 10. If it was on radio, Joyce, comma, James, full stop, interview with Francis Bean, Irish Novelist Weekly, BBC 2, comma, London, 20 May, 1930. If it is a published interview, again, we start with the interviewee's name, so last name, first name, title of the interview, container, by interviewer's first name, last name, publisher, and year. So James Joyce, or Joyce, comma, James, that's the person being interviewed. The artist's portrait, that's the title of the interview. Irish Novelist Speak, that's the title of the container, so it's a book or a magazine. By Francis Bean, that's the interviewer, published by Longman in 1930. If you're quoting from or citing a public lecture or presentation, so like the Distinguished Lecture Series, for example, that our department does. So again, last name, comma, first name, full stop, title of the presentation, name of the conference or event, name of the organization, full stop, day, month, year of the presentation, address of presentation, type of presentation. So for example, Francis Kamakela, that's the author or the person giving the presentation. A pedagogical approach to calypso composition is the title of the presentation. The conference was called Memory, Politics, and Performance. It was held at the University of the West Indies. It was held on the 3rd of March, 2017. And the address, UWI St. Augustine Campus, Trinidad. And it was a conference paper. If you're citing published conference proceedings, last name, first name, you're seeing this trend, hopefully. Title of presentation, conference title that includes date and place. And notice this is italicized now, edited by conference editor, comma, publisher, comma, year, full stop. So for example, Francis Kamakela, that's the author. A pedagogical approach to calypso composition, that's the title of the presentation. Memory, Politics, and Performance, comma, 2nd to 3rd March 2017, comma, UWI St. Augustine Campus, Trinidad. All of that is the title of the conference, date it was held, and place it was held. So all that goes in italics. Edited by Susan Burke. That's the person who put the conference together, is editing the conference proceedings. UWI Press is the publisher, published to 2019. So probably it's 2020 now because they haven't published it yet. Right? That's repeat information. So while it is broad, note that there will be times when the specific thing you're trying to cite may not be covered in the MLA handbook or out Purdue. So you will have to approximate as best you can. Simply put, we are playing catch up. So the style manuals are playing catch up with the type of things that need to be cited, right? So YouTube is a recent addition to the manual, very, very recent addition to the manual. About 2 years ago, you had to kind of guesstimate how you cite a YouTube video. So they finally came up with guidelines for citing a YouTube video. And I can't stress it enough. A lot of the research in Calypso and Mass and Pan is via YouTube, surprisingly. People upload videos. You get to study Calypsonian performance. You get their lovely videos on YouTube from Mass from 1957. So you get to see it in action. So if you're citing any of these things, knowing how to cite YouTube is vastly important, right? So if you flip to the back of any book, you would probably see, you would be able to see citation in action, especially if it's a literary text, well, literary criticism text or a humanities text. They usually use MLA, right? Any questions so far? I know it's a lot, and it's just a formula you kind of need to learn. The formula is there, and you have backup with owl.purdue.edu.com, sorry. One caution before moving on. Do not, I warn everyone, do not use Microsoft Word's citation generator. Learn how to do citations, because the citation generator will generate nonsense if you don't know what you're putting in there, right? So if you do not know the terms that you're supposed to put in there and how you're supposed to put it in, it will just shoot back out garbage. There's the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. So the data you put in is the data you will get back out from your computer. So 9 out of 10 times, everyone I've seen try that citation wizard in Microsoft Word ends up giving me nonsense citations. It's not correct. And that's because you haven't spent the time to learn how to do citations without the aid of a computer. You can think about it this way. If you do not know how to solve a quadratic equation and you punch things into a calculator, the calculator can't solve it for you, right? You need to know how to do a quadratic equation before even your graphing calculator can help you with it. Because if you don't know how to solve a quadratic equation, you don't know what to put in the calculator. And so you end up with nonsense. And it's the same thing with the citation generator. If you do not know how to do a citation and you use a citation generator, it's not going to help you, right? That's like general caution.
Adding a hanging indent to a references page in Word, a tutorial in 1 minute. A hanging indent formats your references so only the first line of text aligns with the left margin. The following lines of each reference are indented. The reference page on the left is incorrect, whereas the page on the right uses the hanging indent and is how your finished page should look in APA format. To add a hanging indent, navigate to your references page. Highlight the full text, right-click your mouse, and select Paragraph. On the Indentation Special menu, click the drop-down to select Hanging. This will automatically fill in 0.5 inches. Click OK. This is the proper formatting for a reference page in APA. You can also do this by navigating to Paragraph and expanding the window. Questions? Need help? Just ask us. We're here to help.
So that is another way to include a hanging indent. Oh, my nose is starting to run. So there are various options. And it also depends on the version of Word you have. I, for one, find it easier to use the ruler, select everything and use the ruler. You can set it in Microsoft Word. And while I would not recommend using the citation generator, I do recommend if you go to references. So this is Microsoft Word 2016 and later. If you go to references, you can actually set your style. Right? I caution too, because depending on the version of Word you have, the style might be outdated as well. So that's another thing for not using the generator, right? I don't even see where it is. Oh. So you have these options here, right? And mine is relatively up to date because this is from working, like the latest. But for this, you have to go to manage sources and you actually have to know what you're putting in. So it's not exactly saving you time if you don't know how to use, if you don't know how to generate your own citations. You need to know how to generate citations before any of this becomes useful to you. Now, in terms of general formatting, there will come a point, especially in a longer document, where you might need to have different types of page numbering. So especially when it comes to doing the thesis, you might need to number pages differently.
Get your free copy of the complete tutorial at www.teachucomp.com/free.
When you create a document, you set a paper size, such as 8.5 by 11. When you reach the end of the specified page size in Word, an automatic page break is inserted. Sometimes these automatic page breaks occur in places where you would rather not have them occur. For example, an automatic page break may leave one sentence on a second page orphaned from the rest of the paragraph. You cannot delete automatic page breaks in Word. Instead, you must insert a manual page break at a point in the page prior to the occurrence of the automatic page break. Inserting manual page breaks is not difficult. Just click into the document at the place where you want the page break to occur. This should, of course, be before the automatic page break occurs. Then either press the Ctrl+Enter keys on your keyboard, or click the Breaks button that appears in the Page Setup button group on the Page Layout tab of the ribbon, and choose the Page command from the drop-down menu. Note that while the page break may be the most commonly used type of document break that occurs, it is by no means the only type of document break available. When you click the Breaks button that appears in the Page Setup button group on the Layout tab of the ribbon, you will see many of the other types of document breaks that are available for use in Microsoft Word. You can also select these types of breaks for your document if the need arises. We will now examine the other types of document breaks that you can insert into your Word documents and their uses within the program. A section break is much like a page break, but it breaks the sections of your document. When you insert a section break, you can then set the page layout independently for each section. For example, when using a next page section break, each section could change the page layout, like changing from a portrait page orientation to a landscape page orientation within a single document. There are 4 different types of section breaks that you can insert. They are next page, continuous, even page, and odd page. A next page section break inserts a page break, but also creates 2 separate sections of the document so that each section can have its own unique page layout. A continuous section break inserts a section break, but continues the next section on the same page as the previous section. The odd page or even page section break will also place a section break and then continue the next section on the next available odd or even numbered page. These are helpful for inserting section breaks into documents that are intended for double-sided bound printing. If you select to view the non-printing characters within your document that contains a page break, you will see that a manual page break is identifiable by the words page break in the center of a dashed line within the document. You can easily delete these breaks just as you would any other character. You simply click into the line containing the page break character and then press the delete key on your keyboard.
Like what you see? Pick up your free copy of the complete tutorial at www.teachucomp.com/free.
So I can't stress this enough. Since we are in the 21st century and we are using Microsoft Word to type everything, knowing these tricks helps immensely if you don't know them, if you don't pay attention. And in my experience, most people don't know how to put in a page break or a section break other than hit enter a bunch of times. And I do mark papers if I'm marking on the computer. I do mark papers with that hidden character toggle on, right? It also helps when you email your documents to somebody else, in class or out of class. When you email your documents, your formatting remains the same if you put in what we call hard breaks. So if you put in a page break, I don't care whose computer you send it to, it will have the page break where you want it in your document, right? Now, since this is COVID, though I've been doing this before COVID, since this is COVID, by the time you get to writing your thesis, which is about 75 pages or more, right? And you send it to your supervisor to look over. When the formatting is not hard set in your document and you email it, the formatting goes out of whack, right? And so where you might have had your picture or your page break for a specific effect and so on, the supervisor is not going to see it. The supervisor is going to think you have not formatted your document at all. And your supervisor, like me, as an example, would get very upset and spend way too much time actually formatting your document, because eventually it has to be printed, it has to be presentable, it has to be publishable. So formatting, of course, plays into that as well. So hard breaks, either your page breaks or your section breaks. When you include a section break, and he didn't show this, one of the major reasons for including a section break, he showed you the orientation, right? But also in terms of numbering. So I would, not what I meant to do at all, back, right? So we'll go to page layout, break, next page, it sends me to a new page. So if I am numbering pages, so if you double click at the top of your page, you get your header. Say I want to insert page number in the top. Right. Now here, where it says not linked to previous. So if I go down to my new section and unlink it, I could take this out, but it's still on my first page. So if you're typing a really large document, for example, when you're typing your thesis, and the first part of your thesis, as you would notice with any book, the first part is numbered with Roman numerals. And then when you get into the main text, you start with Arabic numerals from number 1. So to do that, you need to put in section breaks. So bear this in mind, keep this in mind for when you start to write your thesis, right? If you're doing a longer document, so you're preparing a longer document for work or whatever, and you need the pagination to be different in each section, or you want each section to have a specific heading and have that carry through each section and so on, using a section break next page allows you to do that automatically. So you don't have to number the pages by yourself. You don't have to, manual, you don't have to do any of that. Right, so this will show you how to insert page numbers. No, that's
Hello, my name is Andreas and I'll be showing you how to insert page numbers starting at a specific page in Word 2016. Before we begin, I would like to ask you to subscribe to Octopus Technology as it helps out a lot. We'll use the following example as a guide. What we want to do is first page, title page, abstract page, and table of contents page. We don't want them to have any page numbers at the bottom, and we want the introductory page, which is the main text in page 4, starting with the page number 1 and going through the rest of the report. Okay, first thing we need to do is click on the beginning of page 4, then click on the Layout tab, click on Breaks, and click on the next page break. What this does is it separates the report into two main sections. You can see that by clicking on the Home tab and clicking on the Reverse P button. Now you can see there's a section break in page 3, a next page break. Okay, then we go into the Insert tab and click on Page Numbers. Select bottom of page and then select whatever you want. And there you have it. It starts from page number 1 though. It starts from the beginning of the report and goes through the whole of the report. But what we need to do is make the introductory page being shown as page number 1. Then what we need to do is split the two parts and make the introductory page the second page and make it as so you can number it separately. What we need to do is on the Design tab, without clicking anywhere else on the page, leaving it on the Footer section, on the Design tab you will find a Link to Previous button. What this does is it continues numbering from the previous page and goes through as a unified section throughout the whole report. So click on the Link to Previous button so that it stops being blue, so that it will stop linking to the previous page. After you have done that, go into the Insert tab, click on the page numbers and then click on Format Page Numbers. Then on the page numbering system, instead of Continue from Previous Section, click on Start At and make sure that number 1 is displayed and click OK. As you can see, the introductory page has been renumbered to page number 1 and the previous page has the previous numbers because this is 2 sections. And it's page number 3, 2, and 1. What we need to do now is get rid of the first 3 pages being numbered and just leave the 4th page being numbered as number 1. Now what we need to do is on the footer section on the 3rd page, select the number that there is and on your keyboard press the delete button. What this does is it deletes the previous section of the numbering system. Now what you have left with, once you click on somewhere on the main text, other than the footer or header, you'll get a numbering system on your report, which starts from page number 4. Thank you very much for watching this video on how to number a report starting at a specific page, starting from page number 1. I would also like to inform you that you can buy my services on Fiverr.com, which you can find below in the description, and I'll do the whole thing for you for a small fee.
Yeah, no, we're not buying his services. The second one is in case you have a Mac and not a PC. I won't go through it now. It's there for you to click on the link and you can watch and learn. Also included in this module are some readings pertaining to Dragon Can't Dance, which you can peruse. And then, okay, shut up in here. This is Owl at Purdue. And like I said, if you visit this website, it can give you, and I have it specifically on MLA here, it will give you overview, workshop, formatting and style guide, which is beneficial to us. It will show you general formatting, how to do your paper. So again, no title page. Put your put your credentials in the upper left-hand corner, double space. Everything should be in size 12 font, double space, left justified, and indented. So it should look like this, right? Right. Okay. So again, MLA citation might be a little cumbersome at first, but the more you practice, the easier it gets. If you know APA, switches, there are some key changes, like where you put the year, the fact that you write out the whole last first name and so on. In text, the major change is that there is no comma between the last name and the page numbers, right? So again, it's up there on Canvas for you to go through and review at your own pace. You can keep it open when you are writing your works cited for your different papers so that you can follow the format and get it down. This is 8th, I think it's either 7th or 8th edition that we're in now. So be very wary of that. I think 2016 is 7th edition. MLE, Microsoft Word uses 7th edition. I think that's the latest edition they're up to. I'm not sure for the newer programs. So be very careful of that. I want to go back and look at documentation, since we went over it very briefly last week. So I want to do it in a little more of a structured way. Right, so last week we would have looked at inserting evidence and how you insert evidence in your writing, whether using summary, paraphrase, or quoting, and how you format the evidence to minimize grammatical errors. Right, so the idea behind this is that, and I know you probably encountered this in real life, when someone is making an argument or stating a position and they have no facts to back it up, they have no evidence, or they use what we call ad populum phrases. The ad populum is a specific fallacy where it's a popularly held view, or you assume it's a popularly held view, and that's enough evidence. And in writing, it comes across as many authors have written, but you can't name a single author, or it has been argued that, and who's doing the arguing, who's stating the position, who's making the claim, right? So it's always best to properly cite, and properly citing, properly including evidence strengthens your own position, shows that you know what's going on in the discourse. So you become a more credible sounding researcher.
In this module, we will discuss the effective ways to include evidence in your work. After having completed this module, you, the student, will be able to choose an effective method for including evidence, either summary, paraphrase, or quote, and format evidence to minimize grammatical errors. The most instantaneous way to derail your argument is to misuse evidence, either by presenting no evidence at all, making pronouncements, or using evidence inefficiently. Remember, the burden of proof is on you. At this point, you should not be offering any argument or position without evidence, primary or secondary sources, to back up your claim. While you may be skilled in gathering your information, using that information to your advantage is not as easy as it seems. Regardless of the type of argument, and after vetting your evidence using STAR, there are still a few rhetorical, logical considerations to make. You must determine how you will use your evidence, when you will include it, and whether or not the evidence is doing you any favors. So, how do you use your evidence to your best advantage? Bearing in mind that you are in charge of your people. You do not want to have your evidence overshadow you either. Outlined here are simple steps to follow when using evidence in your writing. First, let us look at presenting your evidence in general. There are three forms of evidence you can incorporate into your text. You can summarize your information. We will all remember doing summaries in school. The same principle applies. Note graphs, tables, and charts are forms of summary, too. You could paraphrase, restate the argument in your own words, or you can quote your source directly. Remember, though, that whichever method you choose, you absolutely must credit your source. If you've ever been in a conversation where you requested specific advice and received a catalog of details, you already know the value of summaries. Summarizing information saves your reader some time while allowing you to focus on key points of your collated data. It also demonstrates that you have done the scholarly work required. Your audience has no deducing or adducing to do. Summarize your source's argument when you are presenting an opposing view. This is vital if you want to maintain your authorial voice. The idea here is that your writing is your voice. Whenever you quote directly, you are allowing another voice into your narration. If this is an opposing voice, you run the risk of derailing your authority over your argument. On the other hand, summarize when you are using the sources in support for your view. In this case, you still want your voice to be the dominant one. If you have explained your position well enough, the source is more garnish than ingredient. A direct quote here might seem redundant, like you are flogging a dead horse, or as Hamlet mumbled to Gertrude, you are protesting too much for it to be sincere. A good summary requires you to identify the main argument or premise of the source, especially as it relates to your position. You must identify what the entire argument, entire article, chapter, and so on is arguing before you can summarize. In other words, your summary should demonstrate that you read and understood the source. Your summary should also identify the point of connection between your source and your topic. Sometimes our source is not directly related to our topic. For example, referencing Jonathan Edwards' Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God and climate change issues. Edwards' text is a blistering puritanical sermon equating disasters with divine retribution, while climate change is usually a scientific debate. However, you may be defining climate change as divine retribution, the fire next time, and environmental damage as sin. Unlike summarizing, paraphrasing is restating a specific point from your source. Rather than sum up the whole argument, you may want to represent a source's point in your own words. Like summarizing, paraphrasing maintains your control over your narrative. It also shows that you are familiar enough with and fully understand your source enough to put it into your own words. As you are in control of your essay, you may choose to paraphrase rather than interject another person's voice into your prose. When paraphrasing, avoid the original source's syntax and grammar. Replacing a few words does not alter the material enough for it to not verge on plagiarism. Also, note that if paraphrasing creates awkward sentence structures or ambiguous language, you may want to quote after all. Quotations often seem like the most convincing form of evidence in an essay. When you insert another's voice into your work, it may strengthen your own authorial voice and ensure that your argument is at least two-sided. To be obnoxiously repetitive, you do not have to quote all the time. In fact, you should only use direct quotes if it strengthens your argument in a way summarizing or paraphrasing cannot. You may choose to quote directly if the language is exceptional. Either the source's wording is so cogent and precise that it is difficult or unnecessary to paraphrase or summarize, or the language is memorable and striking. Sometimes you just want to quote Shakespeare directly because the language is too rich to paraphrase. Maybe the source's phrasing best conveys the pathos or logos needed to make your point. You may also choose to quote because you want the reader to see the language you are about to interrogate. You want your reader to see how you handle the language. If you are quoting an opposing view directly, you want to show the word choice of the opposing view you are dismantling or addressing. Typically, you would include short quotes, less than 4 lines, highlighting a specific phrasing that, hopefully, undermines that opposing argument. For example, your source continually refers to someone in animalistic terms. Highlighting this language undermines your source's credibility as an unbiased analyst. This in turn calls into question the veracity of the argument. If the source is supporting your view, or if the source is being analyzed, you may also want to quote directly to highlight rhetorical devices you wish to analyze. This is especially true of block quotes, which are longer than 4 lines. With an extended quote, you can show how the source structures language and how this informs meaning. This is especially handy when quoting lyrics or poetry or passages in literary texts. It is also useful when engaging in theory. Long or short, including a direct quote makes your writing an active conversation. Bearing this in mind, you should never simply insert a quote without engaging it. You must integrate it into your argument. It is up to you to make the link between your quote and your argument. I cannot stress this enough, but always, always, always introduce your quotes. Apart from that, there are other technical issues to consider when inserting a quote. Pay attention to your syntax and grammar, making sure that your quotation does not disrupt your sentence structure or produce errors. Do not italicize your quote. MLA style reserves italics for emphasis. Thus, if that mythical Australian picks up your paper and sees all your quotations in italics, he'll be confused about your overemphasis of everything, which means you lose any emphasis you wanted to add. Your coda punctuation comes after the parenthetical citation. Here's an example of a short quote. According to that team, Carnival is the people's second life, organized on the basis of laughter. It is a festive life. Festivity is a peculiar quality of all comic rituals and spectacles of the Middle Ages. If your quotation is 4 or more lines of text, use a block quote. To insert a block quote, after your attributive phrase, skip to the next line and begin your quote. Indent quote 10 spaces. Please use your indent tools or tabs. Do not use quotation marks, and the punctuation appears before parenthetical citation, which is on the same line as the last line of the quotation. Here's an example of a block quote. Bakhtin argues, this exaggeration has a positive, assertive character. The leading themes of these images of bodily life and fertility, growth, and a brimming over abundance. Manifestations of this life refer not to the isolated biological individual, not to the private egotistic economic man, but to the collective ancestral body of all the people. Sometimes you may choose to insert a word to make the meaning clearer, or remove a word or phrase because it is unnecessary to the point you are making, or you may want to indicate that the error is in the quote and not simply a typo. When you are adding a word, use square brackets to indicate you have inserted something into the quote. For example, he, Joseph, went that way. If you are removing unnecessary text, use ellipses to indicate an omission. For example, James likes tea. To maintain integrity, you may choose not to alter the quote in any way. If the error is original to the text, use square brackets SIC, S-I-C, to indicate such. For example, James liked tea. There are also some rules to consider when quoting verse or lyrics. If you are quoting less than 4 lines, separate each line with a backslash rather than a line break. For example, Pan from the West was the best. 'Tis the saga of the Pan man who used to wear the crown when Steelman was king in this western town. If you are quoting more than 4 lines, block the quote and maintain the line breaks and visual structure, especially with poetry. Here is an example of a block quote of poetry. God of the pathway, God of the tree, God of all parting. have to quote directly to avoid plagiarism. Plagiarism is more than taking someone's words as your own. It is taking someone's ideas as your own. Whichever method you use, you must remember to credit your source. That being said, plagiarism is relatively easy to avoid. Generally, you can avoid plagiarism mistakes if you introduce and engage your evidence. Let the reader know that this is a different voice and why you are referring to the source in the first place. In other words, avoid starting with the quote. This may be fine for journalism and storytelling, but it is not the best method for including quotes in a scholarly paper. Remember, you want to demonstrate that you are in control of your argument. You want your voice to be dominant. If you introduce your source, you maintain that control. As for engaging your source, never ever just slap a quote into your work and then move on. The burden is on you to show why the source is relevant and necessary. Do not make your audience work for your meaning by mulling over the quotation, paraphrase, or summary. The audience might draw conclusions you do not intend. When introducing your source, use an attributive phrase, a phrase which identifies your source, usually matching how it is listed in the work cited. For example, according to John Smith, as Smith argues, or Johnson posits that. You should always make it clear that you are engaging someone else's idea. This enhances your appeal to ethos, suggesting that you are an honest, trustworthy, and well-researched author. And it allows you to discuss opposing views with clarity.
So, that is a very quick introduction to summarizing, paraphrasing, and including quotations. I can't stress enough that you do not need to quote everything to avoid plagiarism. You can summarize, you can paraphrase, especially in argumentation, and especially at this level, you want your voice to be the prominent voice in your writing, right? Remember, you are setting what we call the tone, which is your attitude towards the material that you're writing about. You are setting the mood, which is how your reader will receive or feel about what you're writing. So if you want to be in control of your sources as well as your own words, paraphrasing allows you to do that. It allows you to focus on something specific in your source, but say it over in your own words. And this does two things. It is similar to what we call active listening when you give feedback. So in communication, when you're talking to someone, it's often encouraged that you repeat what the person said in your own words to show that you've understood, right? I will caution you, if the person doesn't have as large a vocabulary as you, they don't understand that you're repeating it in your own words. But in general, in writing, paraphrasing is like repeating that information in your own words so that you show you understand. Summarizing shows you understand the entire article, book, so forth. So in summarizing, you want to identify what the main idea of the argument is, and how it's supported. You will find you'll be summarizing mostly in like a lit review. If you want a concrete example, so in the lit review, you're going to say, you're going to give us the author, the title of the book, what was the main argument or idea of the book, and how it was developed. So it signals to the reader that you've read the entire thing. You know what it's about. And we should at least trust that any inferences or deductions you make based on this source, viable, credible, worthwhile, right? Based on something. The quotation, and I can't stress this enough, and I will admit my bias, especially when you are doing literary analysis. You don't just simply quote long passages and walk away. We quote specifically because we're looking at the language, right? So language choice, the language you use, is equally as important as the facts or the information being conveyed, right? So in the example, if you talked about the source referring to an opponent in animalistic terms all the time, it suggests a bias. It suggests that the source might not be as credible as you'd want it to be. If you acknowledge that to your reader, you become more credible, right? There was an article the other day I read on, he was lamenting the lack of melody in music. And at first I was like, okay, well, this is interesting, because he was tying melody, complexity, and all that with morality. Unfortunately, as he went through the article, guess what kind of music alone had melodic complexity and therefore expressed a higher morality? Right? And what music then, because it lacked melodic structure or melodic complexity, was leading to the downfall of man? And to give you a hint, he was drawing a rather thick line between white pop music in the 50s and before, and hip hop now. So the language he used suggested a very clear bias. And by the end of the article, I wanted to punch somebody, because I was like, I can't believe this argument still exists. Like for example, the myth that it is only classical music that will enhance a fetus's cognitive skills. So the old myth, you play classical music because it will make your baby smarter. It's any music whatsoever, because it stimulates cognitive what do you call that? 3-4 development. Woo! Took a while, right? So it's any music. It's not just classical music. But the myth that it's classical music, because classical music comes out of a very specific class position, race and class position. So, they'll say, it's the same, you hear the argument that people who listen to hip hop are less intelligent than people who listen to, if they're keeping it popular music, rock music, which is, so untrue, it's not funny. Because we know a lot of intellectually challenged people who listen to rock music, right? But paying attention then, if you're quoting, pay close attention to the underlying biases that will come out in that quotation. As a matter of fact, pay attention to the underlying biases that would come out with any source that you're using and address it. So if this is something you want to use to support your argument, but there's a major flaw or bias or something that you recognize, address it, right? If it's the reason that you are arguing against a source, then obviously you want to address it there as well. So knowing the attitude of your source material will also help determine whether you want to summarize, paraphrase, or quote. That always the end objective is to maintain your authority over to maintain your authority over your work. Now included, I won't really go over it right now. Included, you will see a link to an MLA to help explain the difference between paraphrasing and patchworking. So we've also encountered in marking patchworking. Short way to describe it, that's when you go to different websites and you take little snippets from each website and you slap it together and you form a paragraph and you call it your own writing. It's not your own writing, it's plagiarism, right? Another form is substituting, where you simply switch out words, but you keep syntax intact from the main source. That's really just switching out words. So it's not expressive of you engaging the material in any way. You're just putting in synonyms. So that is also a form of plagiarism. So you want to avoid simply swapping out words. So if the person said, the cat ran away, you don't want to simply say the feline ran away, because you're not really changing the source material. You're simply substituting a synonym, right? You say Jones noted that a cat absconded with the fish. So I'm taking the information from the source, I'm putting it in my own words, I'm showing that I understand what the source information means, right? So we are nearing the 2-hour mark. And the question now, where have you reached? Where are you in terms of Dragon Can't Dance, my beloved book? So last time we were in class, we talked about, maybe identifying some themes that you see cropping up in what you've read so far. So throwing it out, what theme is standing out to you at the moment that you want to talk about, that we should start investigating, we could have a conversation about?
Life Behind the Bridge.
Life Behind the Bridge?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Trevina. I was like, I don't know who said it. I was like, I don't know. I'm just a floating voice. I got scared. So what do you mean by Life Behind the Bridge?
Well, when you listen to Cleotilda and Sylvia and the description of Lovelace of the environment, You know, one time is the hill, and normally being born, well, I don't know if this is a bias, but having been born in through Macaque Laventil, you know, East Dry River, we refer to the areas. You come from behind the bridge, you know, so it really sets the tone, the picture, the everything. You can just see it, you know, registering. It's totally different from St. James, St. Anne's, Maraval, you know. Central South is just behind the bridge.
So
At least that's to me, you know.
So we're seeing the development of a very localized, specific culture within Trinidad. So what you're identifying is the definite behind the bridge culture that we're investigating. All right, keep it going. Go ahead.
No, so far, so good. Anybody else agreeing with me who have read the first 3 or 4 chapters?
So let's start fleshing it out. What are the pillars of this behind the bridge culture? What are the characteristics?
Well, if you look at the descriptions of the houses, the slums, they refer to it as, you know, the slums, the closely built, I can't say shacks, I don't know, you know, I can't remember all of the words, but, you know, the lifestyle, you know, the indication of the prostitution, you know, there's always a central figure like Cleotilda because of her color, you know, and the others who don't want to seem to go against her to win favor. That kind of thing. I wouldn't say it's as bad as Barakat. It's not that, you know, because sometimes, well, from, I don't know, in my growing up, you had, what should I say, like a shack built next to a well concretized foundation, you know, sometimes 2 or 3 stories high, and they're digging out part of the hill, you know, to do that and then complain when it floods. That kind of whole thing, the atmosphere, you know, especially up in chapter 1, you know, you could get a description of it. Leaning over the galvanized to talk to the neighbor next door, you know.
So what else do we notice about this? So we're talking right now about the actual environment, the closeness, the cloisteredness. What else do we notice about the environment? Is the environment painted in a positive light or a negative light?
Negative.
How is it painted in a negative light?
They talk about the barrackyard. They speak, well, any book, they speak about the barrackyard setting. And you have the lady who looks down at people. In the first chapter, she's mulatto, so she feels she's better than everybody else in the yard. And she displays it without any, she doesn't hide it without any malice. The behavior for me in this book is the expression of the society. It mirrors the issues of what Caribbean people usually suffered in that time period. It reflects poverty and frustration, identity crisis. It still had the colonialism aspect. It shows the hardship in that, for example, Aldrich, he was unemployed, and the only thing that used to really relieve him was the actual making of the dragon costume. And it showed you that he was very spiritual when he was doing this dragon mask. And that was the only thing saving his, well, we would say saving his sanity in that time period there. So for me, that's why I saw the hardship. It showed you the bully in Fisheye. But Fisheye, when you look into it, Fisheye grew up hard, and he come up to Port of Spain to see if he could live a better life, but it was still hardship. So that's why I said so far is just, for me, it's hardship.
Okay, so behind the bridge, we have cloistered, we have hardship, we have a definite class and race or color, I should say, not even race, color separation, stratification.
And
What
for
kind
me,
of
even now as well, it what I saw it with same the mulatto, I can't remember her name right now, but she,
Cleotilda?
yeah, Cleotilda, she displayed what will happen carnival time now. Everybody happy coming together at carnival time. And after carnival, she treats her like mess, right? And she even fellow the Calypsonian who wasn't, I think he was in love with her. she didn't used to treat him good because of his color.
And he was a Calypsonian.
Pardon?
And he was a Calypsonian.
Well, yeah.
So he had 2 strikes against him. But what about the actual description? Because there's an actual description of the hill that engages our 5 senses.
I would, Dr. Francis.
Yes?
I look at it, I understand what Trevine just said, but I look at it as, because I grew up behind the bridge, and I know about the Bajonism. I've witnessed some with Tokyo and some other bands and whatever, and even between neighbors. But I also know, and also was part of, there's a particular psyche of togetherness. Nobody from outside can come in that community to do anybody anything or to behave in a particular way that goes against the status quo of the hill. Let us say the hill, talking about the hill, right? Fisheye, the Bajon, he was also the protector of the community, and those young men, they looked up to him, they followed him. So you have to weigh the pros and the cons. You're looking at the Bajonism of Fisheye, yes, but you know, he took those young men under his wing. I mean, he thought he was doing good. He led what I would say like a mini revolution or whatever. And he went to jail and all that, but the way he grew up, he didn't know better. He did what he thought in his mind was right, was the right thing to do. To hold on to that power, he had to exert that, portray that kind of, what would I say? That kind of leadership. But, but all in all, well, it worked for him. The community, they looked up to him. He was the protector of the community and so on. And he used to chastise those young men or whoever that stepped left, So I'm looking at it on both sides.
So if you look at the prologue, for example, the very first thing in this duality that you're talking about is embedded in the language and the description of the hill. So if you flip to the first page of the prologue, right? Yes?
Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because I was talking before, but I realized like nobody was hearing. In terms of the description and the language you're speaking about, what jumped out at me, I wrote, there was I want to say a juxtaposition between the description of the squalor, the scent of the dog mess, and there was a picture that you could have a sense of what the hill looked like and felt like and smelled like and everything back then. And then they connected it in terms of religious. So they talk about the garbage piled high like a cathedral. And then they talk about the garbage sparkling with flies. So even though it was squalor, there was still a sense of hope or beauty in the mess. And that's what jumped out at me in that first part when he was describing the hill. Even when he went on to talk about the laughter is a groan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's where you do it to ease so even in the midst of all the hardships and whatever, they always found a way to see good or hold on to faith, because that's one of the things that kept jumping out at me, this element of a religious connection, even in the language. When it spoke about the tree knows the struggles. That's why I wrote, the tree knows the struggles and has also to grip the earth with its claws, which is the roots. So even the vegetation in the area also knew that this was a battle. And if you want to survive in this environment, you too have to really fight. When you talk about the dog with the ribs showing, so it wasn't just about the people being in a struggle, but all aspects of life in that area was enduring that similar struggle. And that's what jumped out at me, because they gave you a sight and a smell and the winding of the roads and the you know, it was just, yeah, that's what jumped out at me in that first part there.
Yeah, so even before we meet Fisheye or Aldrich or Sylvia or Cleotilda or any of them, we get introduced to the hill almost as a character. And it's a very complex, paradoxical character. Because on the one hand, we're talking about garbage piled high, but it looks like spires. And the architecture he's choosing is architecture that existed in the colonial, or the metropole. So that's the center, the colonizer's place. This was architecture used in the colonizer's space to show mastery. So for example, you had kings who would build cathedrals. They will die before the cathedral is built, but they're trying to through the cathedral gain some kind of apotheosis, a nearness to God, right? And so we have these conflicting images of garbage, which is supposed to be the lowest of the low, compared to spires of a cathedral, which is supposed to be the highest of the high, right? And he does that with Carnival, he does that with Calypso. So before we meet any character, we see this massive potential in the midst of the squalor, as you said, the massive potential for beauty and for something to grow out of it. And it sets the tone then for when we're talking about Behind the Bridge, because this is published in 1979, right? So this is published 17 years for Duni Mas, right? 17 years after independence. This is after the Black Power movement. Well, the overt manifestations of the Black Power movement. This is when we've already had entrenched in us the idea that people from behind the bridge have no beauty, have no soul. And so it's very important that then the hill takes on this double characteristic. On the surface, it is squalor, but in a certain light, it glitters. It's the spires of a church. And it's the same thing that in Carnival. Sometimes, you know, from the outside, it might look like debauchery. People would say is profanity, it's devilment. But inside, there's this potential for reaching heights that you cannot reach in your normal life. And so these descriptions, and even then making that religiosity overt with with what I would call a nod to Miguel Street, with the man who says, stone me, stone me, I must sacrifice for my brothers on the hill until the first stone hits. And, you know, which is also a story, you will see that story in Miguel Street, right? So it makes you wonder if there was actually a madman who did that somewhere in Trinidad. Probably, never can tell, right? And as you talk about fisheye, and I think if I am not mistaken, flipping through, if I'm not mistaken, where's my chapter 4 is where we really get to meet Fisheye and we get Fisheye's story. So I don't know how many people have gotten through chapter 4 already.
That will be a spoiler, miss.
Okay.
My marker is on chapter 4.
All right. Well, chapters 1, 2, and 3, we meet Cleotilda in chapter 1. We meet Sylvia in chapter 2. We meet Aldrich in chapter 3. So when you talked, Trevine, when you talked about juxtaposition, even in the chapters, we are juxtaposing certain archetypes or traits, right? So Queen of the Band is Cleotilda, Sylvia is the princess. And so we are forced to compare them side by side from chapter to chapter, right? Cleotilda is a fading beauty. And then, so what does it mean that she's a fading beauty? She's a mulatto. She once won a Calypso queen. And she didn't win. She placed high up.
She came third.
Right, she came third. And so what does it mean that she exerts this amount of power in the beginning of the novel, but her beauty, her trappings are fading? And on the opposite end, we have Sylvia, who owns nothing. She's a little black girl. She owns nothing but her own sensuality. And she's now ascending. Right? So I don't know if you see that juxtaposition between Cleotilda on the one hand, starting high, but very slowly, not spoiler alert, very slowly in the novel her power starting to wane. As opposed to Sylvia, who who's already actually starting to exhibit her power in a very unconscious way. So when you read Sylvia, it's a natural rhythm, it's a natural beat, it's a natural sexuality, right? That everyone around her is waking up to, including Aldrich, right? So we start this juxtaposition. So between 3 and 4, you're going to get a juxtaposition then of Aldrich, the dragon, and Fisheye, the Bajan. So if you all haven't reached chapter 4, I won't really talk about that too much, but look out for it. As I said, in talking with Lovelace, one of his main concerns in most of his novels is Black masculinity. So that juxtaposition between Aldrich and Fisheye becomes very, very significant to his project. And it is maintained throughout the novel, right? And again, not spoiler alert, but in the beginning, you will see that Aldrich and Fisheye, if not compares, friend. They are good liming partners, they are acquaintances, they roll with each other. And we're going to see that relationship develop in a specific way in the text. So we looked a little bit at using the environment to really set up this whole discussion of what it means to be beautiful, what it means to be productive, what it means to exist in that space between colonialism and true independence. And by the way, so let me ask this question. Can we really pinpoint when this text is taking place? If you were going to put it in an era, what era would you say it's in?
Late 1950s to 1960s, I suppose.
because it is hard to pinpoint.
Yeah.
Right? And I would suggest that,
Mhm.
do you think it's deliberate or do you think it's a slippage?
Not deliberate.
I think it is deliberate.
And if it's deliberate, what are we supposed to learn from that? Why can't we differentiate between pre-independence, which would be 50s and early 60s, and post-independence, which would be the 60s into the 70s?
Because we're still not independent.
We're
Say louder,
still
say louder.
mentally enslaved.
Yeah, that's
A lot of people still mentally enslaved.
Right. So
the attitude coming on, the behavior coming on.
The phrase that came to my mind is the more things change, the more they remain the same.
The same.
yes.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
And now I
And
have Big Brother
I
played
was,
in my head. Thank you very much.
I was thinking also that it could be leading up to the actual 1970 drama that happened, because when I was reading from the play that we got before, the scene kind of sounded something similar to what actually took place. So I was wondering if, it was kind of like playing off on that too. But it sounded like it was leading up to that, where they came together and they went down in tongue and do whatever.
Yeah.
So it kind of sounded similar to the
Yeah.
actual events of 1970.
Yes. And if you did not know, Lovelace was around.
Yes.
Lovelace was very much into the Black Power movement. If you read a lot of his essays and articles that came out in the late 60s up to the Black Power Revolution, quote unquote, he was engaging in that kind of rhetoric. And he was sorely disappointed by the outcome. Right? And you when you read through the novel, you're going to sense that sore disappointment. Again, trying not to give you spoilers if you haven't reached far enough. And so all that comes into play. So there's something very interesting in this almost timeless jumble of eras in Trinidad. You can't really tell. It reads at once as pre and post independent Trinidad. As you say, the more things change, the more things stay the same. And so that's part of having this, you can't pinpoint a year, some books start in a very specific time frame and tie you into that time frame, and that's how they develop the story. So for example, A Tale of Two Cities, we know it's on the eve of the first, because there were four, the first French Revolution, right, which was the most famous French Revolution. This is not as easy to pinpoint the dates, right? We know it's leading up to the 70s because it's published in 1979, so it can't be leading up to anywhere else because it's not a science fiction text. But differentiating between the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s gets a little hard to pin down, even for those who've lived through it, because he's deliberately mixing them for that purpose. So that sense of relentlessness, that relentless poverty, relentless struggling, also comes through in this idea that I can't say the book started in 1958 and ends in 1971. You can't say that. It's not a definite time. Right?
But, Dr. Keeler, I was wondering on the emphasis, as you just said, on the poverty, the area, and zooming in, because there you have Aldrich, when he's trying to analyze Sylvia, and he's saying to himself that he had seen generations of young girls graduate from that environment to the clubs, and then they gone into battle axes of women, and then whodom, and then he described them like wrong-sided nuns. So I really wondered, if there was nobody in the time Lovelace is writing about who would have graduated to any college, any school, and I am like, wow, boy, Behind the Bridge, East Dry River, Laventille have always been stigmatized like this. so that when somebody's child pass for Saints or QRC or so, you know, they look at you differently. You understand me? And you wonder that they're really from behind the bridge, you know, that's kind of thing. So, you know, it was really hard for me to, you know, I wondered, I asked myself what kind of thing, you know, hear me know where Lovelace really from, you know, all kind of emotions. I went to the mill with this man and this book, you know. Wow. And then he said, Sylvia, Aldrich says Sylvia is the most dangerous girl on the hill. Why? Because she's now blossoming and he doesn't want to fall into the trap of either falling in love with her, you know. I'm like, way boy.
Yeah, so it's filtered, the perspective is filtered through Aldrich. And Aldrich, in the beginning of the book, has this core belief that his non-possession, owning nothing, is a cornerstone of his masculinity. And Sylvia comes and threatens this. Because he sees Sylvia, and immediately in Sylvia, he sees this domesticated, standard, quote unquote, life. To have a woman like Sylvia, he needs to have a job, he needs to get her a house. He has nothing to offer her, right? And she starts to challenge this perspective he has. Now, when you talk about Aldrich being unemployed, it's partly by choice, right? And so, while others like Miss Olive and so, they are seeking employment, they're seeking to make a life, they're seeking to do. Aldrich is a loafer. And part of his loafing is that he feels that I can prove myself a man without owning anything. And Sylvia challenges that. That's why she's so dangerous. She challenges that for him. And so we get, it's written in third person, but the narration focus is more or less focalized through Aldrich whenever Aldrich appears, right? So we get to see his perspective on things more or less. So we get that doubling of voice between the author and the character. So I can't 100% say the author is speaking directly through the character. It's the character's perspective as well. And so that squalor, that deprivation, that inescapability is the mood that he wants to set. Not necessarily saying that people can't escape, people can't do better, because we will later see with Philo that it's possible, right? There are characters who escape, but then we have to start questioning, what do we mean by escape?
Exactly.
What are we escaping? Right? I mean, oh gosh, no, yeah, that's a spoiler alert, so I won't say it.
Because
right?
you can't escape from yourself.
Miss, go ahead, Miss Dr. Francis, go ahead. For me, go ahead, because it doesn't get twisted already. So go ahead. I don't know if anybody else passed through, but for me, it's all right that you're going because it's enlightening.
Because Philo, for example, escapes.
But from what?
Well, he literally escapes the hill.
Yeah,
He
but you
becomes
can't
famous
escape
enough
from
to
yourself.
escape the hill. But he's dissatisfied with it. He's dissatisfied with it. So we have to question then.
Yeah.
What measuring stick are we using? The hill is squalor. The hill is poverty, but based on whose schematic, whose set of measurement. And that comes into question significantly when we look at the characters and how the characters are. And he raises the question from the beginning with the description of the hill, right? It is at once squalor in a very capitalist sense. It is squalor. It is nasty, if you want to put it that way. But at the same time, there is a potential in that filth to achieve something a lot greater that has nothing to do with material possession.
True.
And it starts from the prologue that we're going to have this contestation. And it also relies more on how the reader views it. So if you think that capitalist or materialist gain is escape, Philo does that. Philo is not happy, right? Sylvia tries to do that. And Sylvia in the end rejects it. I ain't gonna say how, I ain't gonna say why. Read on, you will find out, right? So just in general, she rejects it, right? And the ending is left open to know how it turns out. We don't know how it turns out, right? When Aldrich reemerges, he does not switch from the ideals of non-possession to the ideals of possession or materialism. He finds a different route. So again, the novel is forcing us to question what really is poverty, what really is squalor. Not saying that living in dog shit is all right, right? But living in dog shit does not dehumanize you or take away that potential to be fully human. So in the first 3 chapters, the prologue and the first 3 chapters, we get the hill as its own character. It's more than setting. It almost takes on a persona of its own. We get to see Cleotilda, and note her name, Cleotilda. Sounds very familiar, does it? What name does that sound like?
Cleopatra.
Sounds like Cleopatra. Yes. And well, you could do a deep dive on that, because the most famous Cleopatra is Cleopatra the 14th, which was the only white Cleopatra, but that's beside the point, right?
I was now going to say the European version of,
yes,
whitewash version.
So her name becomes significant because she's this hybrid, because we have Cleo from Cleopatra, and then we have Tilda from Matilda, right? So she's Cleotilda, so she's this weird hybrid. The mulatto is in her name far less her parents.
And she's Queen of the Hill.
She wants to be Queen of the Hill. She's appointed herself Queen of the Hill because one, of her color, but also because she owns a shop and everyone trusts from her.
Oh, yes.
So she literally has financial control of the hill.
Yes. Yeah.
Until Pariah came.
Yes, until Pariah. And that's why she doesn't like Pariah, but right? And so Aldrich's response to Pariah is also significant, right? So I suppose what I'm trying to drive home is that the meaning isn't only in the actual, like the story, the plot, what goes on. Those character interactions are significant. And it's really through, if we think of the characters as archetypes, representative of, fully representative of human and types, how they interact become important, what they represent become important, right? So when you read chapter 4, think about that subtle comparison between Aldrich and Fisher. Think back on that comparison between Cleotilda, quote unquote, Queen of the Hill, and this rising threat in Sylvia. So she's not just a threat to Aldrich, she's a threat to Cleotilda as well, right? She is an unbridled sexual force who is and is not aware that she is a sexual force. Right, so that conversation she has with Aldrich outside his shack becomes important. The lust that you see in Guy for her becomes important, right? And so here sets us up from the prologue that this is going to be an ugly, beautiful book, There are going to be things in here that are hard to take. There are going to be things in here that make you realize humanity is more than where you are in the moment. Is something that's deep-seated in each person. So I'm going to open it up now for any questions before we go. Keep reading, keep jotting down your notes. Start to think a little bit more. So when you start to identify the themes, like I said, jot down the pages, what you would like, highlight what you would like to quote, so that when we're having these conversations, you can flip through your text, you can go to it, or you can refer to your notes. So in chapter so-and-so, they talk about this, and this is an interesting thing, and this is how the theme develops, and so on and so on and so on, right? I will confess, I haven't reread it this time, but that's because I've read it at least 6 times so far.
It reads like poetry.
It does.
It draws you in. It reads like poetry.
You know, Lovelace wanted to be a Calypsonian, right?
Mighty Straw Hat.
Yes.
Mighty Straw Hat was his name. Yes.
Yes.
When he started.
So it is fascinating to me, but the text is like non-rhyming lyrical calypso. He takes on the poetic calypso. Funzo Ayejini had an article on that. Because Ayejini, I would call a Lovelace scholar. He was obsessed with Lovelace. He is, not dead. He's obsessed with Lovelace and has written extensively on Lovelace, helped edit the collection of essays that Lovelace put out, Growing in the Dark, and all these things. And it's striking that, yes, in Dragon Can Dance, in Salt really stands out. And Dragon Can Dance is his 3rd novel. Yes, 3rd novel. And he starts to hit his stride here because he starts to embrace that calypso narration, right? By the time you get to It's Just a Movie, the narrator is literally a calypsonian, right? So again, that infusion also becomes important in the way he paints the scene and the way the language flows. So it's like reading. It's very poetic. It's very descriptive. The lines run on long because it sounds like it often reminds me if someone took Progress and turned it into a novel. That's the writing style there, right? So, any more questions? Any final thoughts? Any wrap-ups? Anything before we close off for the day?
I am going to try again on Canvas to resend those arguments. I always get a little trouble with Canvas, but I'll try. Tonight I will go on and see, and then in the morning. So I don't know what it is with me and Canvas.
So after you click the submit button, what happens?
Yeah, I didn't get to click the submit button.
If it is after the deadline and after the extension, it will be closed. So I know 1 and 2.
No, but I sent it last night before the deadline, but I sent it to your UTT email because I couldn't get through on Canvas. But
yes,
all I can ask that I try tonight to open it back, and I try tonight because you don't want it on your email, you want it on Canvas.
Yes, assignment 4 is open until November 8th.
I sent assignment 4 is the proposal.
Yes.
Well, I sent that last night.
Yes, it's open until November 8th. It's always been open until November 8th.
Right, okay.
They can take submission.
Right, so I will try and resubmit that in Canvas. And if you can facilitate me and open back the other one, How much I can't remember how much I did now. Canvas is send me crazy.
Well, I'm not understanding the issue. Once you click on submit, what comes up after that?
Nothing. I can't get to click on submit. But I will tonight when I'm finishing.
You've submitted before on Canvas. So when you submitted before on Canvas.
Before, yes.
When you click on submit, what happens?
Nothing happens. So I'm going back. I don't know what I did before. I'm going back into it and ask somebody to help me. I'm going back and resubmit submit the proposal.
Okay, but Annette, you saw the message at the top asking if you would for you to tick the box below. You tick that? There's a message that comes up at the top. You saw that message, Annette?
I can't remember. I think so. I can't remember, but I will go back in. I'll go back in tonight, definitely.
Because if you don't click that, you wouldn't get through.
All right. I will go back in. And I think I have, Dr. Francis, I have the ethical to send to you, and the other one. I sent in two last night. I sent in proposal and I can't remember what I sent last night.
I know 3, 4, and 5 are open currently for submission.
3, 4, and 5.
3, 4, and 5 are open for submission. So that's
until when?
I think I extended it to the 9th.
All right, good. Okay.
Of November, so it should be open for submission.
Okay.
And yeah, my marking
with the proposal and see if it goes through. And then tomorrow, please God, I will do the 3 and 4. 5 is the proposal, right?
Yes.
Right. So I sent 2. No. Argument number 2, which was the causal. I sent that last night also, but I will go back tonight when we finish. I'm going on about give me half an hour or so, and I'm going to go back into Canvas. You know, but don't worry, I'm getting there. I'll get there. I'll get there. Don't worry. I know my weaknesses. I know my strengths. I will get there. You know, so I will get it done. It will be done.
Any other questions? No? Okay. If there are no more questions, I feel safe to leave you all until next week, Monday. The next module we will be doing is a bit of a doozy. It is academic theories or analytical theories that we are common in academia, like Marxist theory, post-structuralism, structuralism, and cultural studies, which technically is what we do in this program, right? So that module is split into at least 2 weeks because there's some discussion to be had. There are readings there as well, so read through and get a hang of. Some of it might sound very abstract, but that's theory. Theory is often an abstraction of the everyday. So jot down your notes and your questions, and we will discuss next week, right? If there are no more questions, feel free to log off. Class is officially over.
Thank you. Bye.
Everybody, bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Okay.